Welcome once again, my friends, and thank you for stopping by to listen to an old storyteller. Today we have three American Indian tales, and the title of the first story is The Man in the Moon. The three Frog sisters had a house in a swamp where they lived together. Not very far away lived a number of people in another house. Among them were Snake and Beaver, who were friends. They were well-grown lads and wished to marry the Frog girls. One night Snake went to Frog's house and, crawling up to one of the sisters, put his hand on her face. She awoke and asked him who he was. Learning that he was Snake, she said she would not marry him and told him to leave at once. She called him hard names such as Slimy Fellow, Small Eyes, etc. Snake returned and told his friend of his failure. Next night Beaver went to try, and, crawling up to one of the sisters, he put his hand on her face. She awoke, and, finding out who he was, she told him to be gone. She called him names such as Short Legs, Big Belly, Big Buttocks. Beaver felt hurt, and, going home, began to cry. His father asked him what was the matter, and the boy told him. He said, "That is nothing. Don't cry. It will rain too much." But young Beaver said, "I will cry." As he continued to cry, much rain fell, and soon the swamp where the frogs lived was flooded. Their house was under the water, which covered the tops of the tall swamp grass. The frogs got cold and went to Beaver's house and said to him, "We wish to marry your sons." But old Beaver said, "No, you called us hard names." The water was now running in a regular stream. So the frogs swam away downstream until they reached a whirlpool, which sucked them in, and they descended to the house of the moon. The latter invited them in to warm themselves at the fire, but they said, "No, we do not wish to sit by the fire. We wish to sit there," pointing at him. He said, "Here," at the same time pointing at his feet. They said, "No, not there." Then he pointed to one part of his body after another until he reached his brow. When he said, "Will you sit here?" they all cried out, "Yes," and jumped onto his face, thus spoiling his beauty. The frog sisters may be seen on the moon's face at the present day. And the title of the second story is The Bag of Winds. Long ago the wind did much damage, blowing violently over the country of the Indian. Moreover, it often killed many people and destroyed much property. At that time there was a man who lived near Spence's Bridge, and who had 3 sons. The youngest was very ambitious, and fond of trying to do wonderful things. One day he said to his father and brothers, "I will snare the wind." But they laughed at him, saying, "How can you do that? The wind is unseen." However, he went out and set a snare. He did not succeed for several nights, as his noose was too large. He made it smaller every night, and on visiting his snare one morning, found he had caught the wind. After great difficulty, he succeeded at last in getting it into his blanket, and made for home with it, where he put it down. He told his people that he had at last captured the wind. They laughed at him. Then, to verify his statements, he opened one corner of the blanket, and immediately it began to blow fiercely, and the lodge itself was almost blown over. The people cried to him to stay the force of the wind, which he did by again tying up the corner of the blanket. At last he released the wind on the condition that he would never blow strongly enough to hurt people in the Indian country again, which promise he has kept. And the title of the third story is The Eye Juggler. There was a man that could send his eyes out of his head on the limb of a tree and call them back again by saying, "Eyes hang upon a branch." White Man saw him doing this and came to him crying he wanted to learn this too. The man taught him, but warned him not to do it more than 4 times in one day. White Man went off along the river. When he came to the highest tree he could see, he sent his eyes to the top. Then he called them back. He thought he could do this as often as he wished, and disregarding the warning. The fifth time his eyes remained fastened to the limb. All day he called, but the eyes began to swell and spoil, and flies gathered on them. White Man grew tired and lay down, facing his eyes, still calling for them, though they never came, and he cried. At night he was half asleep when a mouse ran over him. He closed his lids that the mice would not see he was blind, and lay still in order to catch one. At last one sat on his breast. He kept quiet to let it become used to him, and the mouse went on his face, trying to cut his hair for its nest. Then it licked his tears, but let its tail hang in his mouth. He closed it and caught the mouse. He seized it tightly and made it guide him, telling him of his misfortune. The mouse said it could see the eyes, and they had swelled to an enormous size. It offered to climb the tree and get them for him, but the white man would not let it go. It tried to wriggle free, but he held it fast. Then the mouse asked on what condition he would release it, and the white man said only if it gave him one of its eyes. So it gave him one, and he could see again, and let the mouse go. But the small eye was far back in his socket, and he could not see very well with it. A buffalo was grazing nearby, and as White Man stood near him crying, he looked on and wondered. White Man said, "Here is a buffalo who has the power to help me in my trouble." So the buffalo asked him what he wanted. White Man told him he had lost his eye and needed one. The buffalo took out one of his and put it in the white man's head. Now the white man could see far again, but the eye did not fit the socket. Most of it was outside. The other was far inside. Thus he remained. Thank you once again for listening to this story. If you enjoyed this story, please press that like button. Also, please help an old storyteller out by subscribing to my channel. The next story will be posted in a few days, so until then, may your story continue to be a good one.